There is a very distinct Star Wars style. A lot of it is a gut feeling. It's an instinct for what looks right. The audience has to understand what it is in 2 or 3 seconds at most, and if it doesn't come across, it doesn't work. When I came on board, I knew that I was going to design Star Wars, but I didn't know to what capacity. I was so stressed out. And the first couple of weeks were just like mind-blowing. You know, here I am. I'm actually working with George. I'm working on Star Wars. I consider George one of the best artistic and film teachers that anybody could ever have. It was very fortunate for me where I got to learn and really understand the fundamentals of design. After working with George for about 7 years, I came away with my lessons from George. It's kind of 5 principles that kind of guide me in terms of what I do now. It doesn't matter if you're designing for a Star Wars film or for any other project, these rules apply. One is you design for a silhouette. You go for the icon. You design for the shape. As designers, you tend to get bogged down in the minutiae of like perfect form, perfect proportions, and lose sight quickly of the bigger picture. And that's when I realized I gotta just think like a kid and just draw like a kid. As a kid, you never worry about, oh, is that line straight? You're thinking about the form and the actual content. Don't worry about the details, because ultimately, details are accents, they augment, but they don't define the design. The second one is the best lesson that I learned from George, which is the 3-second rule. During one of our art meetings, I was presenting to George a bunch of designs. He came in the room and very quickly looked at the whole board and right away identified the 2 or 3 that he really liked, not the one that I liked. And I finally had the courage to say, okay, well, why did you pick those instead of this? And he said, well, Doug, the designs have to live by themselves. When you see them on the screen, you're not going to be there to explain what it is. The audience has to connect with it right away. They have to know its personality, you have to know its function, you have to know where the pilot sits, which direction it's going, all those things in less than 3 seconds. And if you can do that in a design without any explanation, the design will be that much more powerful.
It's great. It's going to be one of the great characters.
George is huge on having designs with personality. Normally when you think of, personality, you think of characters. But it applies to vehicles, sets. Everything has to have a personality. When I look at a spaceship, I want to know, is it evil? Is it powerful? Is it menacing? What is its purpose? If you can imbue that in there, then it makes the design much stronger because it helps communicate that to the audience quickly. And then ultimately that drives the story forward. Part of my background is I grew up loving wildlife paintings. When I was designing hardwares, I always try to put in animal personalities. George wanted this very heavy transport. He described it as this locomotive plowing through the jungle. What came to mind was Tarzan riding a bull elephant going through the jungle. And that's what I did. I mean, if you look at the front of the MTT, the tiny little slits represent the elephant's eye and its forehead. And then the trunk, I turned it into the door on it. And then the tusks actually become 2 guns on the sides. It's very subtle, but when you see this thing, there's an instinctual part that you can relate. Like, oh, I've seen that form before, but I don't quite know what it is, but I know it's threatening. The fourth one is believability. It's really about designing to make something that's somewhat believable so it doesn't take the audience out of the film experience. If you're designing something, it can't be so improbable that the audience looks at it and questions it and says, why is that thing doing that? It's impossible. Because the moment that happens, the suspension of disbelief ends and the audience starts to question what they're looking at. Granted, you can bend the rules because ultimately nothing has to be really explained. It just has to look like it can work.
It's working! It's working!
And then the final one for me, I call the geek factor. It's the one that, as a designer, I love to work on because it's the thing that gives the design flair. It gives it that extra thing so that kids want to play with it. It's extra cool. So if you can address all those 5 issues, it creates for an iconic, powerful design that is very timeless. George said, it's wide open. Let's just go out there and explore.